Well, you know the problem with democracy. I don't think there is any country in the world which does not call itself democratic. All countries in the world call themselves democratic. It's a matter, first, of definition, I think mainly of definition and of what we regard to be the essentials of democracy. We certainly ourselves regard ourselves as democratic. We understand why countries used to the multi-party system don't believe that a one-party system can be democratic, or are rather suspicious of the one-party system. We can't, frankly, convince them by sheer argument, philosophical argument, that this is possible. Perhaps the best thing is actually to see this thing in practice. What are the essentials of democracy? The essentials of democracy are that individuals should feel unharassed, that they are actually free in their society. Individual, this is the most essential thing. I never see why an individual should not feel free because of a machinery of election. And the two-party or the one-party is really basically a machinery of election. The second one, when it comes to machinery, is that an individual should feel a true choice of the people he wants to represent him in a government where it's no longer possible for individuals to participate in the government, that you have to select individual representatives. Either sometimes you select parties, sometimes you select individuals. Now, frankly, I don't see why the thing cannot be democratic, simply because sometimes you select a party, which is what the Western countries usually do, and in our own case, you select an individual, the party being given, the party and party policy being given. So, this is the kind of election we went through the other day, and we honestly believe we are independent, and we really ask the old countries at least to be democratic enough, to have a free mind, and to study the new experiments which are taking place in the rest of the world, and this experiment which is taking place now.
Good morning, sio good morning, niseme tu habari za jioni hapo katika, nafikiri ni usiku kweli katika nchi yetu hiyo ya Jamhuri ya East Africa hapo Tanzania, pamoja na kule Nairobi, Kenya, na huku ni majira ya jioni kama mida ya saa 11 na dakika 33, mida ya jioni. Tunakuja moja kwa moja kutoka katika studio zetu za Columbia, South Carolina katika siku hii ya Jumapili. Hapa katika studio zetu za Columbia, South Carolina, Abdul Shatri anamalizia upande wa pili wa Clubhouse ya Swahili Villa Online TV /American Swahili News. Kwa wale ambao walikuwa hawajui, hizi ni organization moja ambazo zinafanya kazi katika kupigania human rights na civil rights za Watanzania. Katika kipindi chetu hiki cha leo sio cha Good Morning Africa. Good Morning Africa itakuja baadaye mida ya 11:40 Eastern Standard Time. Lakini katika kipindi hiki cha leo, kwa wale ambao wanatafuta news Tanzania, tunamleta tena Tundu Lissu. Kama unavyoona katika bada letu hapa, alikuwa ni lecturer ambaye amezungumzia lecture kuhusiana na corruption ambayo ni rushwa, na mahusiano ya hizi nchi za niseme hizi nchi zetu za bara la Afrika, hususan katika nchi yetu ya Tanzania. Somo lenyewe lijikita zaidi katika mahusiano ya serikali zetu za hizi nchi za Afrika na rushwa, jinsi ambavyo kuna connection ya rushwa pamoja na election na mfumo wa kiserikali kwa ujumla. Kwa hiyo basi, bila kupoteza muda, hebu tuende hapa. Nafikiri yupo hapa mmoja kwanza, Shatri, naona kwa sababu ana mambo mengi kule Clubhouse. Shatri, hii hotuba ipo inapatikana katika hotuba hii inapatikana katika channel zetu za American Swahili News na Swahili Villa Online TV. Tundu Lissu huyu hapa.
Working on his second book. His first book is out. I will admit I have not read it cover to cover, but I have read the synopsis. I think we're going to hear some of it today. The topic of which is how parliamentary and executive structures of the government facilitate rather than impede corruption. Elements of the ruling party in Tanzania have tried repeatedly to silence him. We're glad you're here. Culminating in an assassination attempt on his life in September of 2017. Leading up to that, in that year alone, he was arrested 8 times. He was struck with 16 bullets, one of which is still in his body. He spent 14 months nonstop in hospitals in Nairobi, Kenya, and in Leuven, Belgium, being treated, and as he told me this afternoon, with a total of 25 surgeries. He still carries his wallet, or has his wallet, that has 4 bullet holes. He briefly returned to Tanzania to serve as the Chadema opposition party's candidate for the 2020 political election. Earlier this year, he returned to Tanzania full-time, I believe, returning from exile in Belgium. And just last month, he was arrested and briefly detained on his way to a community organizing meeting around indigenous land rights in the northwest part of the country, I believe it was. Mr. Lisu, we're very happy to have you here, and we look forward to learning about your experiences and about how corrupt structures operate from a ground level view. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Nice that?
You can do anything you want.
Oh boy, anakaribia kuzungumza hapo. Mheshimiwa Tundu Lissu huyo ndo ananyanyuka anaelekea kwenye podium kuzungumza katika special class ambayo imetayarisha wanafunzi ambao watafanya kazi ya serikali katika agencies za serikali hapo Marekani. Lissu huyo tumpe nafasi tumsikilize, anakwenda katika podium pale kuongea mbele ya darasa. Huyo anaongea.
First of all, please allow me to say thank you for the invitation to come and talk to you, share some of my stories, the stories of my country, the stories from Tanzania, and perhaps stories from country, the stories of Tanzania. Because what I'm going to say about Tanzania today has a lot of relevance in what is happening in many other African countries. They are not just African stories, I think, they are also very human stories. Because the issues that we are dealing with, the issues that I have dealt with, are very human issues. Corruption, malgovernance, abuse of power in its multifarious ways. So these are human stories. I think they will most likely also, you will also find in them American stories too. Professor Yankee has said, I was arrested last month going to political rally to show solidarity to the community that is threatened with eviction from their ancestral lands. The Maasai of Ngorongoro. I don't know how many of you know about Tanzania, but the Serengeti Ngorongoro is one of the most beautiful places on this earth. And that beauty has caused a lot of harm to the local people. The people who are threatened with eviction today were actually evicted in 1959 to create the modern day Serengeti National Park. So when you see those beautiful scenes of animal migration, which involve the movement of more than 1 million wildlife between northern Tanzania and Kenya, when you see those vast empty spaces, empty of human beings, you should know that they are empty not because there were no people there to begin with. They are empty not because that is pristine nature. They are empty because the original inhabitants were driven out of those lands in order to create those empty spaces. Now, those who were kicked out in 1959 to create Serengeti are now being kicked out. And if we allow it to happen, they will be transported some 547 kilometers away to a land where they were not born, where they know nobody, where they are not used to. It is the Maasai's version of the Trail of Tears, if you know what I mean. You know the Trail of Tears? So when I say Tanzanian stories are human stories, nearly 200 years after Andrew Jackson drove out those 5 civilized tribes from southeastern United States to the west of the Mississippi, we are seeing the same thing in Tanzania. These are human stories. But I want to talk about the structures and institutions, the governance structures and institutions and processes that allow these things to happen. I want to talk about our constitutional politics and the way those constitutional politics have allowed abuse of power, corporate abuse of power, and I'll come to that very briefly, very shortly, how our constitutional and legal structures and governance structures have created the conditions that allow corruption to thrive and that allow abuse of power and human rights abuses of the most horrible nature to happen. Now, to start with, in documents made public recently in British courts in London, we now know that Barrick Gold Corporation is one of the top 3 leading gold producers in this world. It's a Canadian multinational mining company based in Toronto. We now know, as a result of the publication of those public documents in English courts, that for years, Barrick Gold was paying the Tanzanian police and intelligence and security apparatus to keep the peace in the company's 3 gold mines in Tanzania. Barrick Gold, according to those documents, was paying was making monthly cash transfers officially to the Tanzanian police force and to the intelligence and security agency to make payments for police officers, paramilitary units, and intelligence officers to keep the communities at bay in the areas around the mines. Now, you would wonder why would a Canadian mining company pay millions of dollars to Tanzanian security forces to keep the peace? What has happened in those areas? in Tanzania's mining fields, Tanzania is Africa's third largest gold producer now. Now, in the process of transforming the country into the third largest producer of gold in Africa involved a state-organized violence against hundreds of thousands of rural people who were living in the lands which are now gold mines owned by Barrick, and tens of thousands of artisanal gold miners who worked those fields before Barrick moved in. So the process of Barrick obtaining the gold reserves that it currently exploits in Tanzania was a very violent one. It involved forcible evictions of perhaps hundreds of thousands of people. My first arrest came on Christmas Eve of 2002, and it was because for 3 years I had led a campaign to expose the human rights abuses associated with those evictions, with Barrick acquiring those areas. So it has been paying millions of dollars to Tanzanian security agencies in order to continue keeping the communities out. When the documents were released a few weeks ago, it made major, it was front page news in one of the leading British newspapers. It was on the Times of London. It was on the Financial Times and so on. It came as a surprise to many, but it did not come as a surprise at all to those of us who had been involved in the fight against this company. It didn't come as a surprise to the thousands, the tens of thousands of communities whose lands were taken away by force to make room for Barrick to build its gold mines. In other words, we have known for years that for Barrick to operate, they have had to pay off a lot of people within the government of Tanzania. They have had to pay a lot of people within our security agencies. So it didn't come as a surprise to us at all. The mere fact that the proceedings that led to the publication of these documents in London, instead of perhaps Dar es Salaam, should tell you something about Tanzania. I spent more than a decade trying to prosecute Barrick in our courts. It didn't work at all. It didn't work at all. I didn't get nowhere. It couldn't get a hearing anywhere in our courts. Couldn't get any sympathy anywhere within our government or the press. And then we realized that maybe we had to find ways of fighting them in courts where there is a possibility of getting a hearing. And that's how we went to Great Britain. So cases that have been filed in the UK have led to publication of these documents. And there is a lot of stuff that has come out as a result. And perhaps those who could not get justice in Tanzanian courts may get justice in British courts after all. It is because our courts are part of the problem. Our courts are thoroughly corrupt, and they have been corrupted by these big corporate players such as Barrick. Now, I said I want to talk about the constitutional structures, the constitutional and legal structures that allow these things to happen. So I would like to give you some background about our constitutional order, our political and constitutional order. And that, to me, is where the central problem of corruption lies, and the central problem of abuse of power and abuse of office. Tanzania has a political system and a constitutional system that resembles somewhat the American political system. We are not a parliamentary democracy. We are a presidentialist democracy. We have an executive presidency like the United States. We don't call ours the Supreme Court, but we have our version of the Supreme Court. It is called the Court of Appeal of Tanzania. It is both an appellate court as well as a court of original jurisdiction. We have parliament. It is not a two-chamber parliament like your Congress. It is a single-chamber parliament. Now, where is the problem? The problem is Tanzania's constitutional order, our constitutional order, is built around the presidency. Our president and our presidency has been described by constitutional scholars as an imperial presidency. An imperial presidency in the sense that the Tanzanian president enjoys the kind of powers, of constitutional powers, that were enjoyed by European monarchs of the time before the 19th century revolutions, the edge of revolutions in the 1840s and so on. Our president enjoys absolute powers. Our president is not only a head of state, he or she, now we have a she. Can I have some water? Is that possible? Yeah, please. Okay, thanks. I'm sorry. Our president, now it's a she, enjoys the kind of powers that are similar to the powers that 18th century European monarchs enjoyed. Unlimited powers. She's the head of state. She's the chief of government. She's the commander-in-chief of the armed services, of all of our armed services, including prisons and the police force. Our police force is a national police force. As a head of state, the Tanzanian president is also part of parliament. Our constitution is our parliament is divided into two parts. You have the House of Representatives. It is called National Assembly, composed of elected, semi-elected, and unelected members. And the other part is the president. Now, you only find that model in Britain. You only find that model in Imperial Britain. The British king is always a part of British Parliament. Now, our president is part of our parliament. So when we say imperial presidency, in fact, it is literally true. Our president has powers and privileges and prerogatives that are similar to British kings or British monarchs. So she is now, but she is part of parliament. She not only assents to bills that are enacted into laws, she also gets to appoint a certain number of members of parliament. So our parliament, unlike the House of Representatives here or Senate, our National Assembly is made up not only of members elected in constituencies, it also is composed of members who are appointed by the president, 10 of them. As head of state, our president has power not only to summon parliament to sit or to prorogue it. To prorogue is to send it home. Our president has powers to even dissolve the National Assembly. He can dissolve our parliament. I wonder if the president of the United States has powers to dissolve Congress. Ours does. If our parliament passes a law that the president does not like, he can veto it. The parliament has power to override that veto. If the president still doesn't like the law, he has power to send parliament packing. So in terms of the relationship between the presidency and the legislature, the shadow of the president towers over our legislature. There is no check and balances there. The president has more influence, even inside parliament. As chief of government, the president of Tanzania appoints anyone of consequence. He appoints, again, now that she's a lady, she appoints all ministers and their deputies. She appoints all heads of government departments, heads of independent institutions of the government, like public universities. She appoints local, district, and regional administrators. She appoints all judges and other senior judicial officers and administrators. She appoints all members of constitutional commissions, constitutional or statutory commissions, commissions such as the National Electoral Commission. So she gets to appoint the heads and members of the Electoral Commission, the Judicial Service Commission, every commission that you can think of. Its chairpersons and members are appointed by the president and their chief executives. She appoints the clerk of the National Assembly. The clerk of the National Assembly is the chief executive officer of parliament. She appoints all the service chiefs, the armed forces, and commanders of individual units of the armed forces. She appoints the police chiefs and senior police officers. And the Constitution declares that for those public servants who are not directly appointed by the president, they are deemed to be appointed by her and they work on her behalf. So think of a clerk or a cleaner in a courtroom somewhere in rural Tanzania, and she is deemed by our constitution to be appointed by the president, and she works on behalf of the president. Because the president appoints all judges, you can be sure that our judiciary is not independent at all. She not only appoints judges, she is also the ultimate disciplinary authority over all judicial officers. She is the ultimate disciplinary authority over all public servants in the country. She can hire and fire anybody. She has powers to constitute and to disestablish public offices. She can create ministries and appoint ministers as she wants. It is a complete discretion. So when we speak of imperial presidency, that is what we mean. A presidency of this type is not only powerful, it is also protected against accountability. It is protected against any form of accountability. Our president cannot be charged in court with any crime for anything she or he might do while in office. So the immunity is complete. What is happening now here with Donald Trump is unheard of in Tanzania. In fact, people are shocked that these Americans are prosecuting a former president for actions that he may have done while he was a sitting president. That is unthinkable for a country like Tanzania, because the president enjoys complete immunity from prosecution. And that is why you have a spectacle of a former president, Benny Mkapa. He was our third president. In 2019, a year before he died, he published his memoir in which he explains somewhere about how he and some of his senior advisors connived to steal $100 million from the Bank of Tanzania, from our central bank, in order to provide campaign funds for the ruling party, for his party and its presidential candidate. So President Jakaya Kikwete, our fourth president, was elected, if we have to believe President Mkapa, was elected on stolen money. So think of an American president writing memoirs in which he's saying, well, I was a thief, and he getting away with it. So President Mkapa could get away with it because the immunity against prosecution for former presidents is near total. And we have seen time and again presidents, our presidents, while in office, committing crimes for which, if they were committed by somebody else, they would send that somebody else to prison for many, many years. Stealing has become institutionalized, and it is organized at the very highest levels of our government. It is done fairly openly. And it is done that way because our constitution has given complete protection to presidents. It is not just immunity against prosecution. Our presidents also have prerogatives that remind you of 18th century European monarchs. Our president can pardon convicted criminals regardless of whatever crime they may have committed. I know that is an issue here too. Now the prerogative of mercy, as that thing is called, is a drawback to European monarchies of the type that was led the patriots in this country to fight the British. Prerogative of mercy, so he can pardon prisoners regardless of their crimes. The president can declare war, states of emergency. He has powers to detain citizens without taking them to court. This is an innovation, one of the first innovations of independent Tanganyika, by the way. The British, in spite of the oppressive nature of the British colonial state in Tanganyika and other colonies, they never had detention without trial. That is a post-colonial innovation. So, in brief, the presidential shadow hovers over the nation like, you know, it's horrible. You cannot run away from the evil shadow of the presidency. Our president has near total control of the electoral process. She gets to appoint members of the National Electoral Commission and its chief executive officer, as well as those who declare results in a presidential election, the returning officers in electoral districts. Our law requires local government executives to be returning officers in general elections, and all of these are presidential appointees. So the entire machinery of elections is controlled by the president. The president exercises influence, more influence in constituency demarcation, in what you Americans call redistricting. And you cannot believe the gerrymandering that system has allowed. The president basically has carried out redistricting of the country in ways which defy logic. But it is because he has all these powers. Now, in terms of decision making, you can imagine that kind of power. It is without any restraint. It is without any meaningful checks and balances. And therefore, it creates very fertile breeding ground for very high level corruption. And the stories that we have endured in Tanzania in the past 3 decades prove this. Our second president, the first president, was a very clean man. He created this system, but he was a very clean man. Our second president started to exercise his presidential powers in ways which have become now common, using the constitutional powers that he has for self-enrichment. It has become a pandemic now, and it is done openly. So we have a situation where in the latest installment of these never-ending scandals, we have a situation where the current president, the lady Samia, has just privatized all of Tanzania's ports and harbors and related transport infrastructure to a company. You probably know, we may have heard it. They tried to get some ports here. Dubai Port World. Dubai Port World is a government-owned a port operator that is owned by the government of Dubai, by the Emirate of Dubai. In a deal signed in October of last year, the president has given all of Tanzania's sea and lake ports to Dubai Port World for a time that is unlimited, for a term that is unlimited. The agreement says that deal will come to an end if one of two things happen. One, if either the individual agreements in respect of each particular port comes to an end, and we have more than 20 sea and lake ports. So if individual agreements concerning any of those 20 plus ports come to an end, then the agreement will come to an end. Or if the activities undertaken under the agreement are completed. Now, an agreement to run ports, to manage ports, to develop ports, when will it come to an end? When will we stop having ports so that they cannot be managed, so that they cannot be improved? You know? So it is unlimited. The term is unlimited. As long as we have ports, we will need to manage them. We will need to improve them. We will need to expand them. And therefore, Dubai Port World will continue to manage our ports. The deal says the agreement cannot be terminated under any circumstances, even if there is a breach of diplomatic relations between Tanzania and Dubai, or if there is any other reason or circumstance, including even if it is contrary to international law. The president signed on it. For once, our president did it personally. The practice has always been they will hide behind their ministers. And this one, Samia's own hand is on the document. It was taken to Parliament and it was passed inside 1 week. No debate. So, and we have seen these kinds of actions. Now, to conclude, therefore, if you want to understand why some countries are so corrupt, I think that it is important to examine the constitutional and institutional arrangements that are in place that allow governments or government officials to get away with these kinds of abuses. If the constitutions and the statutes provide the kind of unlimited powers government officials the way they do in countries like Tanzania, then where they say power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So where there is absolute power, in other words, if we want solutions to problems of corruption, we must address the institutional and structural issues, the constitutional schemes that allow them to flourish. That is why in Tanzania for the past 30 years, we have called for constitutional reform in order to create constitutional structures which will enable us to hold our to account their powers in our names. I say these are the stories from Tanzania are human stories. What you see in Tanzania, you will see in many countries on the continent and beyond Africa. So thank you once again thank you for the opportunity. And I will answer thank you. I'll answer your questions if any. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Oh boy. Baada ya niseme tu hotuba hiyo au lecture hiyo ndefu ambayo ilikuwa ni kama zaidi ya saa nzima, imebidi tuikatishe kidogo hapa. Mheshimiwa Tundu Lissu alichukua maswali na majibu. Sasa kwa kuwa tutaki kuwachosha sana hapa katika kipindi hiki maalum kabisa katika siku hii ya Jumapili, hotuba hii inapatikana American Swahili News pamoja na Swahili Villa Online TV. Ukienda uka type to Tundu Lissu and Dalamo School of Business, utaweza kuipata hiyo hotuba yote kabisa ambayo zaidi ya saa nzima. Kwa hiyo katika kipindi chetu hiki cha leo cha Good Morning Africa, Good Morning East Africa, au ni Tanzania ambao wametoa maoni yao wakati Mheshimiwa Lissu anaongea katika kipindi hiki maalum kabisa katika siku ya Jumapili, ambapo kimekuja mida ya usiku huko Tanzania na huku ni jioni kama saa 12 saa hizi na dakika 18 za jioni. Kwa hiyo basi kama kawaida yetu katika kipindi hiki cha leo maalum kabisa ambacho tunawaleteni kuendelea tu ule mwendelezo wa kuzungumzia kwamba Mheshimiwa Tundu Lissu aachiwe bila masharti yoyote na aendelee na shughuli zake za kisiasa, na serikali ya Jamhuri ya Muungano wa Tanzania iendelee na mambo yake ambayo imejiweka madarakani, kama nilivyoongea katika siku za nyuma kwamba waendelee kufanya shughuli zao, wamtoe Mheshimiwa Lissu na waendelee na uchaguzi unakuja, waendelee na shughuli zao za uchaguzi, maisha yaendelee, kwa sababu tunahitaji kwanza haki, alafu pili ndio iwepo hii amani na serikali hii ambayo iko madarakani iendelee kufanya mambo yake. Chadema nao waendelee shughuli zao za kisiasa hapo Tanzania. Tanzania ni nchi ya kwetu sote, na Tanzania kama nilivyozungumza kwamba ni nchi ambayo ilijengwa kwa misingi ya haki pamoja na usawa kwa Watanzania wote, na binadamu wote ni sawa na kuheshimiana. Na hiki neno hili amani nilizungumza katika kipindi cha nyuma kwamba lilikuwa created au manufactured na Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere. Tanzania kuna amani, lakini lazima iwepo haki kwanza, ndio amani ipatikane. Kwa hiyo basi tunamalizia kipindi chetu hiki cha leo maalum kabisa cha Good Morning Good Morning Africa, Good Morning East Africa kinakuja si masaa mengi sana, kitakuja leo mida 11:45 PM Eastern Standard Time. Lakini katika kipindi hiki cha leo maalum hiki kabisa cha hiki ambacho tunaleteni tu hii hotuba na tunaombeni Tundu Lissu aachiwe, na tutakuja leo katika kipindi chetu maalum kabisa cha Good Morning Africa, Good Morning East Africa, mida ya 11:45 PM Eastern Standard Time. Lakini katika siku hii ya leo hapa ndipo tunafikia niseme tu mwisho kipindi chetu. Kwa wale ambao bado subscribe, share na like video zetu, na tumerudi rasmi katika Clubhouse. Tuliachia zaidi ya miaka 4 hivi, tuliachia Sauti ya Tanzania pamoja na vyumba vingine viungurume. Sasa tunaona umuhimu wa American Swahili News pamoja na Swahili Online TV kufungulia vyumba vyake vya Clubhouse. Tuanze na mjadala wa Shatri katika studio zetu za huko Washington DC. Siku hii ya leo tumefungulia Clubhouse kuzungumzia muungano na ACT Wazalendo. Kwa hiyo tutakuwa tunakuja, si mara nyingi sana mtakuona katika Clubhouse, lakini tunakuja na full effect katika Clubhouse, Swahili Online TV pamoja na American Swahili News. Lakini katika siku hii ya leo, masaa machache tu tutakwenda hewani tena katika Good Morning Africa, Good Morning East Africa. Lakini hiki kilikuwa ni kipindi tu cha jioni hivi, Sunday evening news. Tumeamua tutuke hotuba tuwakumbushie Watanzania hotuba ya Tundu Lissu, ambapo alikuwa akizungumza hapo Columbia, South Carolina, katika University of South Carolina, hapo katika chuo cha Dallamore School of Business. Kwa hiyo basi tumalizia kipindi chetu hiki cha leo cha Sunday nightly news, kwa kuombeni tu kwa wale ambao msubscribe, nendeni msubscribe, mshare na muifuatilie hotuba Mheshimiwa Tundu Lissu hiyo ambayo ipo yote